I think that when a lot of people consider a new Halo game of a classic style, they imagine it without changes from their favorite past iteration, or perhaps they don't understand the minutiae of the classic games enough to fully express what they're asking for. As a result, it sometimes sounds to newer fans that older fans are just asking for Halo 2 or Halo 3 again. While this might be true for some, I feel that there are a number of features in the classic Halo games that we never saw fully developed, at least while Bungie was at the helm. As much as it sounds like heresy to say, Combat Evolved, Halo 2, and Halo 3 aren't perfect games. Especially in the multiplayer, certain concepts seem to have been experimented with in a given game in the classic trilogy, and then scrapped and entirely replaced by the next entry. Things changed dramatically between Halo CE and Halo 2, and Halo 2 and Halo 3. Contained within all these games are the pieces to construct the ultimate classic Halo experience. But a lot of these concepts were never mixed correctly, and were never taken all the way in their respective games. The point of this video is to explain the intricacies of the weapon timings in the classic Halo games, and what I would like to see to create a fully realized timing system for Halo, which doesn't hold the player's hand too much, but also provides him with the information to know when weapons are up, and play with and play off of that information. Weirdly enough, there is a Halo game that got this aspect almost exactly correct, and it kind of surprised me too. I'm mostly speaking from the perspective of someone who likes to play and watch technical Halo and similar styles in other arena FPS games, so keep that in mind. That being said, I think that understandable weapon timings both benefit competitive players and social or casual players. I think that good systems are good systems regardless of how seriously players take the game. For reference and to cite my sources, in this video I'm going to be using timings and information that's been collected by the player Ocom on Steam, so definitely go check out his guides. Obviously, everything that I say will be tempered by my own personal experience as well. For the points that I'm trying to make, I'll need to explain some of the intricacies of the classic Halo games, but I'll try to keep this concise so that everyone can understand how the weapon spawn systems work and how to create the best Halo weapon spawning system. In Combat Evolved, weapons are spawned on the map at set times, almost like spawn waves. If you don't know what that means, here's how it works. Weapons and items are set to respawn after a set amount of time, largely regardless of player interaction. Let's look at an example on the map Prisoner. At the beginning of the match, everything is up, and after a set amount of time, each item will come back up. For example, let's look at the rocket launcher. Rockets are up at the beginning of the match, and will always spawn in increments of 2 minutes after the match starts. Regardless of if a player picks up the weapon and uses it, or if the weapon was to run out of ammo, another rocket launcher will always spawn 2 minutes after the match starts, and 2 minutes after that, and 2 minutes after that, and so on until the game is over. The same would go for other weapons. The sniper rifle is up when the game starts, and spawns every 30 seconds after that. This goes for power-ups too. The active camouflage is up when the game starts, and a new one spawns every 1 minute, regardless of when the last player picked it up. In Halo CE, players have little to no effect on weapon spawns and power-up spawns. Instead, the map just drops them in on set intervals, as I've previously illustrated. This means that in versions of Combat Evolved where a game clock is visible on screen, you can always know when items are spawning. In my opinion, this spawn system works very well because it provides an interesting challenge in keeping track of when the items are coming up during the chaos of a Combat Evolved match. Teams can action their map knowledge by preparing to fight when they know that the next weapons are going to be available. CE is very famous for its plays and counterplays to do with weapon spawns, most notably grenade launches. But the actual timing and spawn system itself, while very good, leaves room for improvement. If both teams are experienced and know when weapons and items are coming up, to an extent, the map and game timer are dictating the pace of the game more than the players are. The rockets always will spawn in 2 minutes, so what are you going to do about it? The options to answer this question are very broad in Halo Combat Evolved, so there's still tons of room for player interaction and skill expression, but because players cannot influence the weapon and item spawn timings, it does limit player expression. There is a huge information game in CE based on which items are coming up and the plays and counterplays to secure them, but ultimately the map is just spawning weapons and items and the players are reacting. Halo 2 changed the way that items spawned. Instead of being based on set times after the match start, Halo 2 has 2 separate spawn systems, both based on player interactions. There are 2 distinct types of weapons, which are defined differently depending on the map in play. Certain weapons are tagged as regular weapons, and these will respawn a set number of seconds after the player picks them up. For an example, let's look at this battle rifle. On lockout, this BR is going to respawn in 45 seconds now that I've picked it up. Note the difference here between this and the CE example. This isn't based on intervals after the start of the game, this is based on time after a player interacts with the weapon. It doesn't matter if the gun is still in my hands, or if it's out of ammo, or if it's despawned from the map. Because I picked it up, 45 seconds later, a new copy of this BR is going to spawn. For the record, power-ups like overshields and camo work in the same way as regular weapons in Halo 2. For example, the overshield on Beaver Creek will spawn 1 minute after it was last picked up, or the camo on Warlock will respawn 1 minute and 10 seconds after it was last picked up. So, standard weapons and power-ups spawn a set time after they were last interacted with, but Halo 2 also has a second weapon spawn system for weapons tagged as super weapons. These are differently defined on every map. So for instance, on some longer range maps, a sniper rifle might not be set as a super weapon, but instead a regular weapon. But on most of the competitive maps, super weapons are going to be weapons like rockets, sniper, and beam rifles. Also for clarification, yes, the timings do change for the MLG hardcore settings, but the logic of the spawn system remains the same. So if a really experienced player is watching this and they notice something weird, it's probably because I'm using the standard social timings. The way that super weapon respawns work is that they cannot spawn until after the existing copy has been deleted or despawned from the map. Once the existing copy of the super weapon has been removed from the map, then the weapon spawn timer will begin, and after that amount of time, the super weapon will be available again. Weapons can be despawned by dropping them and not interacting with them for 30 seconds, running them out of ammo and dropping them for a different weapon, running them out of ammo and dying with them in your inventory, or by the weapon getting knocked off the map, though the last one is a bit tricky and sometimes kind of glitchy. Regardless, when the existing copy of the super weapon is removed, the spawn time begins, and a new copy will come up after a set amount of time depending on the map. So on lockout, after the last sniper rifle is despawned, the new sniper is going to come up in 38 seconds, and there it is. The super weapon system, in conjunction with the regular weapon spawn system, at least in my view, is an improvement on what CE started. While the spawn timings in Combat Evolved work very well and certainly add to the unique flavor of that game, Halo 2's spawn system puts further emphasis on player interaction, as players using the weapons is what drives the spawn cycles, even for the most basic of items. And just as an added bonus, unlike in CE, you can actually see the overshield on players, both friendly and enemy, which means that you can now tell when both power-ups have been taken and anticipate when they're next going to be coming up. With regards to super weapons, there's an even wider skill gap in timing them, because you need to work with your team to know when you or your opponent has a weapon, figure out when they've been despawned from the map, and anticipate when they're next going to be coming up. And of course, all of this is happening during the chaos of an actual Halo 2 match. There's additional levels to the play and counterplay of the Halo 2 timing system, as the team who last had a weapon will try to conceal when they're dropping it, and in close games they'll need to adopt a posture to get the next one without giving away when the next spawn is going to be. And of course the other team is going to try to catch wind of this, anticipate when the next spawn is going to be, and decide if they're going to fight for control of the item. As you should be able to tell, this is building off of what Combat Evolved started, but it's a few layers deeper. The map still dictates how long it takes for weapons and items to spawn, but the players have a greater deal of influence as to when that happens. Of course, there's even more layers deeper than this due to Halo 2's unique spawn system. Check out this trick on Sanctuary, where if you get the other team's sniper rifle, you can just go and collect your team's sniper ammo, thus removing it from the map and putting it on respawn. And because these sniper rifles are super weapons, and because the opposing team's sniper rifle is still in your hands, every minute you're going to get another stack of ammo, and the other team will have to make a play in order to get their sniper rifle back. This shows just how much expression and player influence there is in the spawn system in Halo 2, and how powerful the information game around weapon and item spawns is when players have impact on the system. Perhaps Halo 2's timing system isn't always calibrated perfectly, but the logic of how it works is the strongest in the series in my view, and should be the foundation that Halo multiplayer built off of going forward, at least for the competitive arena-style maps. The problem is that there's one gigantic issue with Halo 2 that makes its timing system not work as well as I've illustrated. The fix is obvious, but unfortunately, the pieces were never put together while Bungie was at the helm of the Halo series. Halo 3 again changed the timing system, and it's honestly really weird. By default, it's based on a system where the timer starts ticking based on when a weapon is disturbed, but as a result of this, there can be a huge variance in the timing that isn't always clear or predictable, even with lots of information. I won't be going into tons of detail on this default system here, but you can read OCOM's guide for Halo 3 in order to get more info. Overall, the default social timing system in Halo 3, while I do think that it's interesting and I do have some experience playing with it, it isn't an ideal system going forward for the Halo games. And this is because while players do have a high degree of influence on the system, compared to Halo Combat Evolved and Halo 2, this system is much less clear and more confusing for players. For the MLG hardcore rules, Halo 3 went back to set interval, static weapon timings, very similar to Halo Combat Evolved. The Forge map editor was used to make weapons get disturbed on spawn and spawn at set times, leading to predictable spawn waves for weapons, just like in Halo CE. And I, for one, do think that this system is preferable to the default Halo 3 spawn system. For a bit of cool player expression, players could... Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm sure that somebody out there was hoping that I'd explain a system called dirtying, where players could manipulate the spawn timings, even in MLG. But unfortunately, this system was removed in an update for Halo 3 on the Master Chief Collection. I'm not sure if this was accidentally broken or if it was deliberately removed, but regardless, it doesn't work anymore. If you want to learn more about weapon dirtying, please check out the creator Shyway's video, which I'm going to link in the description. Getting back on topic, as I said before, the static timings in Halo 3 MLG were certainly an improvement over the default spawn system. Power-ups are still visible on Spartans, and player interaction still drives the power-up spawn system, similar to Halo 2, and I'm very glad that this was retained. That being said, power weapons are back to spawning on set intervals, just like in Combat Evolved, with no player influence as to when a weapon will next spawn. I believe that this limits player expression and significantly nerfs the info game of Halo 3 compared to Halo 2, for the reasons that I illustrated in the Halo 2 section of this video. It's not necessarily that I think that Halo 2 had a perfectly calibrated spawn system for every single map, but the logic of the spawn system being driven by player interaction left more room for player and team skill expression. In Halo 2, the players in the server had more input on how they interacted with weapons, and thereby the map, the pace of play, and the game as a whole. Halo 3 having a somewhat confused standard weapon spawning system, and then going back to something more similar to CE's static spawns, was, at least in my eyes, a big step backwards. What makes this even more tragic is that the problem that I mentioned about Halo 2 is actually fixed in Halo 3. Look at this Spartan. Just looks like a standard guy with a BR, right? Well, no, he's got a rocket launcher. And this is the problem with Halo 2's spawn system. You can't see the weapons cosmetically on your opponents, and that hugely limits the counterplay potential and ability for trailing teams to predict the next weapon spawn. In Halo 3, weapons are cosmetically displayed on the Spartan. This means that your enemies aren't randomly popping out rocket launchers on death, or secretly dropping a sniper rifle to put it on respawn with no penalty. If Halo 3 built off of Halo 2's spawn system, this would mean that if you got eyes on an enemy with a super weapon, like a rocket launcher, on their back, you would know that the weapon is not despawned from the map, and therefore can't be on respawn. If the same super weapon carrying enemy snuck away and despawned it, yes, you might be a few seconds off, but you'll know when to predict the next rockets because you won't be seeing them on his back anymore. You'd be able to work with your team to add the weapon's spawn timer to the current game clock, and that's when you're going to have to posture and decide if you want to fight for the next important power weapon. Yeah, you might be a few seconds off, and they might do a great job of hiding exactly when they've dropped the weapon, but that illustrates the importance of information plays and counterplays, which weren't really available in the Bungie Halo games. In Halo 2, the player's secondary isn't visible, and in Halo 3, there were different spawn systems. To continue the same example, if you kill an enemy with a weapon on their back, and it does not drop when they die, you know that you just started its respawn timer. That weapon was out of ammo, and it was just despawned from the map. This is important information. Halo 2 does not give the player this information, and Halo 3 has a different spawn system, so you cannot use this information related to power weapons. The next power weapon is just going to come up on a static spawn time. But in this situation, because the player who had the empty weapon on their back was careless and didn't consider the information game, your team now knows pretty much exactly when the next power weapon is going to be spawning if you've been paying attention. Because of important actionable information being given to the player, your team can now fight for the next weapon that's coming up. This would also make players need to be cautious about how often they're showing up in their enemy's vision, because having weapons then suddenly showing up without them means that your opponents can challenge for the next one. But even this can create counterplay opportunities by dropping weapons between players or trying to play short-handed to deny the enemy information on when you're dropping the important power weapon. This would be the perfect weapon respawn system for competitive Halo on the standard arena maps. Halo 2 had a great weapon timing system that put player agency forward, with player interaction driving the spawn system. By adding the ability to see weapons on your opponent's backs, players would have the visual information necessary to open up even more play and counterplay options, leading to further strategic and tactical options around weapons. And strangely enough, we pretty much got this. But before I get to that, unfortunately, the new Halo titles have gone even further away from this kind of player-driven system. Infinite, the newest game as of recording, has all sorts of different weapons. Super weapons spawn on static timings like in CE. Standard weapons behave like the standard weapons in Halo 2, with them going on respawn right when you pick them up. And these red bar kind of weapons sort of work like Halo 2's super weapons, only respawning when they run out of ammo. But there's a problem.
S7 sniper inbound.
Yeah, the map just tells you everything. All the standard weapons tell you when the next spawn is by the use of an indicator, and the most important weapons are called out by your AI announcer, and further indicated by timers and text. Sure, the weapons do visually display on the Spartan, which is great, but there isn't a need to hold the player's hand this much. If a spawn system similar to Halo 2 is in place, and the weapons visually display on the Spartans, a player can figure everything out. There's no need for the map to tell you everything. Maybe if this was just in the social modes like Slayer and Big Team Battle, it would be okay, and it would avoid frustrating new players. And while I don't necessarily agree, I can totally understand that perspective. But this is true of all modes, even the HCS competitive settings. This means that in Infinite, even in the hardcore HCS settings, player expression around weapons and their timings is very limited compared to Halo 2, and I would argue that it's even limited compared to Halo 3 and Halo CE, regardless of which spawn system we're talking about for Halo 3, because at least in Halo 3 and Halo CE, the maps don't time everything for you. I'm not trying to throw excessive shade on Halo Infinite. I actually think that it's quite a decent game nowadays, and obviously it is a Halo game, so even if people do know when a weapon is coming up, there's still a million different ways to play off of that information. It's just that the weapon spawn system is less deep, and in some ways much less deep, than what was offered by the classic Halo games. Despite the fact that in Halo Infinite, all of the information is present in the game to use a player interaction driven spawn system like what was present in Halo 2, or in fact a better version of the one that was present in Halo 2. They went with a hand-holding spawn system for pretty much all the modes. Alright, so I think I've been leading everyone on long enough. Which game have I been alluding to getting the spawn system at least mostly right? Halo Reach, much like Halo 3, had its systems broken between the default social modes and the competitive MLG modes. The MLG hardcore settings worked very similar to Halo 3's, and the default setting almost felt like an overcorrection to Halo 3's default setting. The system remained vague like Halo 3's default settings, but was very exploitable, with power weapons seemingly coming off of respawn very quickly. Some people referred to this as the instant power weapon system, and I actually do detail this later in the video. And Halo 4 began the icon and timer spam that I was criticizing in Halo Infinite. Halo 5 is even more similar to Infinite, with weapons and items being called out to the player. So, when was a Halo 2-like system with visible secondaries actually used? If you're a purist, you're definitely not going to like this, but it was actually in Halo 2 Anniversary. Halo 2 Anniversary is a game that no one wanted. It was built out of Halo 4 and loosely mimicked Halo 2, but it didn't really satisfy new or old fans at the time. Normal Halo 2 is on MCC, and as scuffed as that version was at launch, and I mean, still sort of is, it's much better than H2A. H2A wasn't helped at all by having some early tournaments that were totally messed up, with games ending and players lagging out all the time, because at launch, MCC just didn't work at all. And seeing as it was the new, uninvited game to a collection of classic games, it didn't really get a fair shot. And just to clarify, I'm not saying that H2A is secretly amazing or something like that. It's just that because the game was never embraced by a significant portion of the community, its very competent refinement of the Halo 2 spawn system was never really acknowledged. Sure, people could figure it out, and I'm sure that pros and broadcast talent understood exactly how it worked, but the game outside of the competitive scene was largely rejected, and 343, now Halo Studios, hasn't tried to reuse this timing system. But I guess that's what being farmed out to a different developer and then having a broken launch does to a game. To get back on point, Halo 2 Anniversary uses a system where weapons can be tagged into multiple types, like in Halo 2. Super weapons operate the same way as Halo 2, only starting their respective respawn timers once they've been despawned from the map. Halo 2 Anniversary also experiments with more weapon types than standard Halo 2. It has static spawning super weapons as well, which spawn on intervals similar to Halo CE, and they occupy maps right next to ones that work like they do in Halo 2, although I have heard that some of these static spawning weapons are actually bugged or broken. It also has a system called Instant Super Weapon, which is similar to how Halo Reach's super weapons work, and these are very interesting because the respawn timer for these weapons starts ticking the second that you pick them up. However, there can only be one of this weapon on the map. This means that there can be another copy of the weapon ready to spawn, but it can't spawn because the previous copy of the gun is still in your hands. Then, as soon as the copy that you still have is despawned, the next one will spawn quickly thereafter. In addition to matching the Halo 2 spawn system, and in fact adding more weapon types to it, you actually can see the weapons cosmetically displayed on the backs of enemy Spartans when they have them as their secondary weapon. This means that for the player interaction based spawn systems, you have all the available information needed for you and your team to make informed plays around when the next copy of that weapon is coming up. The ideal spawn system that I described earlier in this video, by combining Halo 2 and Halo 3, actually was implemented in Halo 2 Anniversary, with a bit of Halo CE and Halo Reach thrown in for good measure and variety. The problem is that this spawn system was implemented in a game which hurts my eyes, and that no one wanted. When I consider the possibility of a new, classic-inspired Halo game, I'm not just looking for a recreation of Combat Evolved, Halo 2, or Halo 3. While all of these games are spectacular, as heretical as it sounds to say, some of their systems do leave room for improvement. Regarding the weapon and item spawning systems, building off of the player-driven system that is present in Halo 2 seems like a no-brainer to me. But even Halo 2 wasn't able to get this right, as it failed to provide players with the information necessary to make plays around the weapon spawns. Halo 3 totally changed the system again. MLG changed Halo 3's system, and even the later mainline Halo games by both Bungie and 343 failed to build off the foundation that was laid out by Halo 2. I hope that if Halo Studios is considering making a classic-inspired Halo multiplayer game, that they don't look to Halo 2 Anniversary for too much inspiration. The game really has a lot of problems, even leaving to one side the launch controversy of Master Chief Collection. But at least in terms of the logic of the weapon and item spawning, H2A has the best system. It successfully iterated on the foundation that Halo 2 laid down, and while I don't really care for the other systems, and I definitely don't care for these weird little markers where the weapons are supposed to spawn, it provides a very comprehensive, player-driven weapon spawning system with all of the information that players need to make informed decisions around the weapon spawns, with pretty well no hand-holding, no announcer callouts, and no overly vague systems. I'm not exactly thrilled to say it, but H2A has the best weapon timing system that Halo forgot. Hi, this is Reaching 8. Thank you very much for watching. If this video gets decent traction, or even if it doesn't and I feel particularly motivated, I'll probably do more like this, detailing the minutiae of classic Halo, talking about the systems that I think are best from each of the Halo games, or explaining systems or iterations on systems that I would like to see in a future classic Halo game. I'm not under some sort of illusions that I can change the direction that Halo Studios would take for their future games or anything like this. I just think that it's an interesting subject, and I know that a lot of people who watch our channel like hearing me ramble incoherently about the obscurities of the older Halo games as if anyone gives a shit. On another note, this video is going up just as the Cult Zodiac channel is passing 100,000 views. I'm well aware that a lot of our views are on our shorts content, but seeing as myself and the other members have had to work to rebuild the channel, I'm really happy with that number of views regardless. Going forward, I want to keep offering something for the less engaged passersby. That would be the shorts, the short form content, but also for the long-time viewers, which would be like the podcast and this sort of long-form content. As always, let me know if you have any thoughts on the video. Let me know if I got anything wrong. Yell at me in the comments. And again, thanks for tuning in.